Good evening and welcome to Nashville. It's the home to good food, great music, and really nice people. I'm Alan Jackson, and I'm glad you're able to join us. Israel continues to attract considerable attention from the outside world with its continuing warfare on two fronts, Gaza and parts of Lebanon. While the war with Hamas shows no sign of peace prospects nor any progress on the return of the hostages, we are seeing glimmers of hope in Lebanon. A fragile ceasefire is in effect in southern Lebanon along the border with Israel. There have been sporadic dueling attacks in spite of the agreement. The United States and its Arab allies back the ceasefire and are urging each side to observe it fully. Well, at this point, we can only watch and I pray. TBN has its own seasoned watcher on the case, and he's been with us several times before. Standing by in Jerusalem is Yair Pinto. Welcome back, Yair.
It's great to be here, Alan. I wish I was there with you in Nashville, one of my favorite cities.
Well, I would be glad to have you here, but I would be willing to come to Jerusalem to sit with you. Maybe soon, if the Lord is good to us.
Yeah.
Tell us, what is the latest on the observance of the ceasefire, given what we've seen earlier this week?
So, as you said, this is a very, very fragile ceasefire. Already, in the first weeks, first days after the ceasefire came into effect, Hezbollah terrorists began testing Israel to see if we are serious about this ceasefire, about this no man's zone on the border with Israel, about them staying north of the Litani River, which is what the ceasefire and also what the United Nations resolution called for them to be. So there will be some kind of buffer zone. And after a few days, the terrorists of Hezbollah began moving trucks into the no man's zone to test the IDF. And this time, the IDF responded against them, and they went back up north. On top of that, only yesterday, 2 mortars were fired from Lebanon to an IDF base in Mount Dov. This is a community, an area in Israel on the northern part on the border with Lebanon. So the ceasefire already was violated by Hezbollah, but this is nothing new. The IDF expected that and was prepared for that. And because of that, we had an agreement with the United States that we have the freedom to respond ourselves to any kinds of violations that threaten the security of the IDF soldiers and the people of Israel.
Thank God. Israel agreed to the ceasefire with Hezbollah only after some heated internal debate. What do the various factions in the Israeli cabinet stand for after these latest attacks? And what has it taken to get a consensus from the Knesset?
So, it's very hard to get a consensus in the Israeli Knesset and amongst the people of Israel in general. Let me just explain that this ceasefire agreement does not mean that the residents of the northern communities can go back home. Nowhere in this ceasefire agreement, the residents, the people of Israel, were called to go back to their houses. This is a 60-day military ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, and the residents of Israel are still sleeping in hotels, being actually refugees in their own country. And I'm talking about around more than 80,000 residents of northern Israel that are living for more than a year now in hotels with their families and renting houses in other parts of the countries, while their houses, some of them are destroyed completely, so they don't have anywhere to go or are still in an active war zone. So this is why many people in Israel say that this ceasefire is not the answer, because Hezbollah is not going to be destroyed completely. So the day after the residents come back, Hezbollah can decide to launch more attacks. And we know that the international community does not really guarantee the safety of the people of Israel, as they haven't done so before since 2006 in the Second Lebanon War, that United Nations peacekeeping forces were supposed to keep Hezbollah fighters away from the border. But we've seen, and I personally seen, Hezbollah terror tunnels underneath United Nations buildings or next to them within a few hundred meters. So we have no one to trust but ourselves. So the situation is still not so optimistic for the return of the residents of Israel to the north.
Yeah, there's still much work to do. And just to be clear so everybody understands, there's entire communities, entire towns that had to be vacated. Tens of thousands, over 80,000 people have not been home in over a year, which means their children haven't been to their schools. They've missed all the normal routines that would have been a part of their lives because of the terrorist activity in the north, which most of the world just completely ignores. They'll talk about Gaza and Hamas in the south, but Hezbollah in the north and all the Israelis that have been forced to evacuate their homes. I mean, Israelis never imagined you'd have to evacuate territory in Israel, I don't think, until this most recent problem in the north. So what's your timeline? When do you think they get to go home?
Well, you know, I'm an optimistic kind of guy, so I really hope that within 2 months, the government will start calling the northern communities back to their homes. And the goal is that at this time, we'll have like a real buffer zone between the Israeli communities and Hezbollah fighters, and a real ability to keep them safe. Because the fear is that if they return to their homes and there is no presence of the IDF, of military people that can protect them, the same thing that happened in the Gaza Strip on October 7th, the massacre of thousands of terrorists storming into Israel and murdering Israelis, will happen 10 times more on the northern border, because you have 10 times more terrorists in Hezbollah than what you had in Hamas.
Because Hezbollah, they are better armed than the terrorists, than Hamas was down in Gaza. Hezbollah has Iranian missiles. I mean, they are very much a functionary of the Iranian military. Is that correct?
Yes. So just before the war with Israel, Hezbollah was considered the largest, the best equipped, and the richest terrorist organization in the entire world. They were the crown jewel of the Iranian Islamic Republic. So they threatened 3,000 rockets at Israel every day for months before this war started. And because of the Israeli, interactions that included the pager attacks and the destruction of the walkie-talkies and all the communication bases of Hezbollah on preemptive strikes, that I think we'll have movies on these operations that are including with spies and undercover agents of Israel, we were able to catch them off guard and basically destroy their ability to carry out these multiple attacks on the people of Israel. And that's a miracle. It's not just because the IDF is strong or the people of Israel are something special. It's just because God is protecting us and keeping us safe against all odds, against all these enemies that want to destroy us. So just a word of encouragement. Guys, if you're having a hard time in your life and you're under attack for multiple stuff in your family, in your work, just look at Israel. We are under attack from 7 fronts for more than 400 days, and we're here because God keeps his word. He's faithful to the people of Israel, and he'll be faithful to each and every one of you.
All right, the Israelis are telling us not to be afraid. Well, I know you recently traveled to the northern border and had an opportunity to look through a Hezbollah tunnel. You took your camera crew, and I'd like to share some of your reporting with our audience.
We are between 10 to 40 meters underground, depends on what area you're standing, and we're about to enter the ammunition room that Hezbollah stored its weapons, its food supplies, its logistical supplies. Take a look with me now. To my right here, you see cans, food, everything that they need. This is canned food, kind of like tuna. And here behind me, you can see AK-47s, grenades, RPG launchers. Looks like they were a bit more organized than Hamas in Gaza.
Well, I know you've been in both the Hamas tunnels in Gaza and the Hezbollah tunnel in the north. Can you quickly just tell us a little bit about the differences in those two locations, or do they look the same?
Now, the tunnels of Hezbollah are at least 10 times more sophisticated, more equipped, bigger, and longer, which means you can enter a tunnel inside a village just in the backyard of a house wearing flip-flops as a civilian, and then exit on the other side, which is 50 meters away from an Israeli community, a fully equipped terrorist. And you can carry out a terrorist attack against Israel, but just by walking 10 minutes across the border or riding a motorcycle. So that's what they planned. And thank God that the IDF was able to get there before they carried out their plans to take over the northern part of Israel.
Well, I believe I heard a report that that tunnel you toured, the IDF blew up after your tour.
Yes. So the IDF is trying to destroy all these strategic and tactical terror tunnels so that, in the future, when the IDF withdraws from Lebanon, it will not be used again to pose a threat for Israel.
Well, we'll be back with more from Yair Pinto after just a short break. Stay with us. We're back now with Yair Pinto, TBN's reporter from the Middle East, giving us an update on what's happening in Jerusalem and broader Israel. Yair, President-elect Trump apparently has lost patience with the lack of progress in freeing the hostages that have been taken over a year ago. He has warned that if the hostages aren't released by the time he takes office on January 20th, and I quote, "there will be all hell to pay." In your opinion, what does that mean, and what do you think the Prime Minister, would he welcome that help?
Well, yes, definitely. I think that the people of Israel, and me personally, are welcoming any kind of pressure on Hamas, on their leadership, on their financial institutions, and basically anything that can bring back 101 hostages home after 424 days in captivity in an underground tunnel, under conditions that I can't even, describe, terrible conditions. They need to be home now, as soon as possible. So I welcome this threat and this pressure on Hamas very much, and the people of Israel really want to see what the next United States president is going to do in order to release the Israeli hostages, including also Americans that are kept hostage in the Gaza Strip by Hamas for this entire time.
It's unbelievable. Elections have consequences not only here in the United States, but our elections have consequences around the globe. As we approach the new year and a new administration in Washington, what are your thoughts about the future of Israel and a return to a safer state?
Well, we and the people of Israel in general are feeling very optimistic about the result and the relationship with the United States, especially with the President-elect Donald Trump, because in his last term, he moved the embassy to Jerusalem, which is something that no other president of the United States did. He also recognized the Golan Heights as part of Israel, which is also something that no other US president did. And we believe that we have a partner that understands the Middle East. The Middle East does not understand talk, it understands action. And that's what these terrorist organizations know, and that's what they respond to. So we are very optimistic, and we feel like we have a partner with us to carry out our goals of retrieving our hostages, destroying Hamas in the Gaza Strip, destroying Hamas in Judea and Samaria, bringing the residents back to the north. And there's also the Houthis in Yemen, there's also Iranian militias in Iraq and Syria, and the Islamic Republic of Iran that are threatening Israel and are developing their nuclear weapons, which is the main deal, I think, of this four-term year of Donald Trump, is to counter Iran's ability to threaten the world with nuclear power.
Absolutely. Well, before we go, I'd like to ask about you personally. You're reporting on what has been a very long war while continuing to work. How does all of that weigh on you and your family? I know you have a delightful young family.
Well, yeah. Listen, my family are with me. They've been through a lot this year, a lot, especially in the beginning months of this war, where I was also called as an IDF officer to defend the country in the northern border against Lebanon, then inside the Gaza Strip, fighting Hamas terrorists. I'm a tank platoon commander. That's my second hat in life in Israel. You are also a soldier, and you have your civilian life. And I believe it's really important, to share the truth about what is happening in Israel with Christians around the world and everybody around the world. And I believe it's important because all of us were called to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And how can we pray for this city right behind me, by the way, if we don't know it personal? So I'm trying to make it personal. So when people pray, they know to pray for a hostage, to pray for a situation, to pray for a soldier. And I believe that this is what God told me to do at this time during this war. So I'm motivated by that, and my family is motivated by that. But it's not easy. And if you need to pray for someone, pray for the wives that are taking the burden of the family while all the husbands, most of the husbands, are fighting in the IDF and are away from the kids and the family for a long period of time.
Well, Yair Pinto, thank you for being with us tonight. You have an open invitation to join us back on set in Nashville when your schedule permits.
I'll remember that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay with us. I'll have some thoughts of my own right after this break. I've had the privilege of being in Israel multiple times since the attacks of October 7th. I've been to the site of the music festival. I've walked the streets of some of those neighborhoods that were ravaged by terrorists. It's a very difficult time. It's a confusing time. Israel today is still at war on two fronts. And in a world filled with deception, there's some real benefit in having a foundation of Scripture. In Genesis chapter 13, God made a promise to Abram. He said that he would give him a parcel of land to Abram and to his descendants forever. Now, I believe forever means forever without exceptions. I believe that land is a part of the inheritance God has given to the Jewish people, regardless of what the United Nations or the U.S. State Department has to say, even Hezbollah or Hamas for that matter. Israel and the Jewish people have a unique commitment from God, and if you didn't know this, God keeps His promises. I think one of the messages for us as we watch this unfolding conflict is that God will keep His promises in your life and in mine. But those promises are often challenged, and we'll have to have the courage and the determination to trust God and to live out His promises so we get the benefits. If you'll do that, I assure you there's more reasons for hope than despair. Well, I'll be back in a moment, and we're going to start looking at your emails. We've got emails, as they said in the movie. Thank you for taking the time to share your emails with us. We always look forward to reading them. Sandy from Michigan said, thank you for taking the time to host Alan Jackson Now, in addition to your busy life as a pastor serving the Lord. Your voice is bold with the courage to talk about issues the American church is mostly silent on. Thank you. We are listening. Well, Sandy, I appreciate it. You know, for much of our nation's history, our pulpits in our nation were the places where truth was told. It was much of what bound us together as a people, and I pray that we will see that emerge again. But thank you for your encouragement. Finally, George from New Jersey, he said, President Trump is demanding the release of the October 7th hostages by January 20th. Do you think they will cooperate? Well, George, if what we're watching holds, I absolutely do. We've seen the Prime Minister from Canada make his way to Mar-a-Lago. We've seen the President of Mexico respond. World leaders are taking note that there's a new attitude in Washington, D.C., and it seems to hold the promise of an expression of peace and stability in our world, in spite of what some of the knuckleheads in the media have been reporting. I think the hostage will be released. Well, if you haven't yet, take a moment to send your emails to comments@alanjacksonnow.com. Your feedback and questions, they do a lot to shape our show. I'm Alan Jackson. Have a wonderful evening.